hair doing?
So it has been a hot minute since I filmed my last video. But we're back, don't worry. Honestly, it hasn't been a rough semester. I'm only taking 3 classes, so theoretically I could have filmed the video, but I was kind of a bit lazy. But anyways, I'm back. Let's play the intro so that I don't have to keep talking. So exam seasons are coming up once again, and I wanted to share my routine. I already have a video uploaded on my channel about my specific study routine, but since then I've just been putting it into place, and that's why it works for me, like finding my own study routine. And I wanted to share it again. I've also added a few resources, so it might be helpful to someone new. But yeah, without further ado, let me stop yapping and actually get into this video. So I feel like studying is something that's very personalized. Not everyone is going to have the same study routine, and that's where people oftentimes fail when it comes to studying. People assume that everyone studies the same exact way, and they say, oh, why is this person studying and I'm doing the same exact thing and not getting grades? Well, it's because everyone studies a bit differently. The routine that I've personally developed has been curated over time. The first time I used this routine was for my midterms first year, second semester. First semester of uni, I was not studying correctly. I was too focused on the textbook and doing all those extensive reading. But since then, I've developed this technique that has helped me narrow down my studying, and I'm able to transfer it and apply it to many different classes. Studying actually begins before you come to class. You need to maximize your time both inside and outside of class, so I'd recommend that you start your revision before you come to class. Now, it's nothing too crazy. I'm not going to make you sit and read like 30 pages of your textbook readings. Coming prepared to class means that you're, first of all, obviously regulating your physical self, your mental health, all those fun things. But in terms of your academic success, I want you to take a look at the content before you actually come to class. A lot of professors will actually post their lecture slides, lecture notes before you come to class, so take advantage of that. And if your prof doesn't post them, literally just ask. I've had a few classes in high school where my teacher actually posted it in advance because someone got up the initiative to ask. The first thing you're going to want to do is take a glimpse over the slides. You're not reading anything in depth, but you're just taking a glimpse. Oftentimes, as a student, you can get discouraged when you see a slideshow that's like over 60 slides, and it's just like, wow, what do they possibly have to talk about? But oftentimes teachers will add like filler slides that only have 2 words on them. You don't really need to focus on those. I first want you to prep your mind to get a gauge of what the content's going to be about. So that means taking a look at your diagrams, taking a look at any bolded words on the slide. This is a time where you're not going in depth into the content, you're just introducing yourself to it. And you need to give yourself credit because sometimes these concepts, you've already learned them in the past, you just need that little bit of a refresher. What I personally do is I will take whatever PowerPoint I'm working with and I'll transfer it to a Word document. This just works for me because I use that same Word document for every other step in my study routine. But obviously, if you take physical notes, do that. Again, the whole emphasis of this video is not to feed you all this information like I'm talking at you. It's very important to incorporate it in your own routine and just apply it as much as you can from it. The next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna actually go to class. I know it's hard. Some days it's snowing, some days it's raining, but I would still recommend going to class. Sometimes profs will actually give you hints as to what's going to be on your final exams or your midterms just by you showing up to class. And I know a few classes actually give participation marks, which gives you a bigger incentive to go. But incentive or not, still go to class. It's just a great way to immerse yourself in an environment of people who are also trying to understand the content better. Now, when you're in class, what I'd recommend that you do is you actively take notes. For me, this looks like typing up what the professor's saying, and I'll admit I try and get a lot of that information verbatim. This is just because I have a huge fear of missing out, so I'm scared that if I don't actually write down a topic, or if I'm like, oh, I already know this concept, I'll completely forget and then it'll be on the exam. But obviously, again, tailor this to your own routine. I know some people like to handwrite them. Some people also like to print out the lecture slides and then annotate them in class. It's all up to you. But again, highlighting that I like to type them in that same Google Doc I used for my pre-lecture stuff, so that it's transferable to every other aspect of this routine. Catching on now? Now that you're done with your pre-lecture stuff and your in-lecture stuff, we're gonna move on to the post-lecture stuff. This is where I'm gonna bring out my handy dandy iPad where I have my own routine. So for every single class, I approach it in the same manner so that I can get consistent grades. For me, it's been proven that 7 days is the perfect window to get all the studying done. 7 days starting from the day I have class, or if it's an online class, the day that that lecture is posted up until the exam. This is because it's an adequate amount of time to where I have enough time to review all my content and I'm not cramming, but it's also not too big of a gap to the point that I forget all the information that I studied. So I'm gonna use my pathophysiology class as an example, replace the name of your course in lieu of my class, just because that's how I'm thinking about it. So my patho classes are on a Thursday. Thursday before class, as I mentioned before, I take all my handy dandy notes and I come to class with those same exact notes. When I'm in class, I'm still annotating on that same document and I'm just copying down what the professor says. Now, a great way about the way I study is that would be enough study for the day. I feel like people oftentimes are over bogged down by the fact that, oh, studying looks like I'm in a library, I'm in a cafe, I'm writing things down. But studying looks different for everyone. Throughout the next 7 days, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be listening to podcasts on my way to school, on my way out of school, on my way to the grocery store, just trying to incorporate this content. Let's say that the topic is the pancreas. So, I did all my notes on the pancreas, I came to class learning about the pancreas, and now when I listen to podcasts, I'm going to listen to all my podcasts on the pancreas, just to refresh my memory. And because I'm in a healthcare context, I'm a nursing student, and these concepts can be applied to med school, kinesiology, potentially, I don't even know, but just applied to a bunch of broad healthcare fields. I'm not going to limit my focus on nursing podcasts. This again is going to be applicable for all the other aspects of my study routine, but you really need to get out of the narrow mindset of, oh, because my professor mentioned it, I need to only focus on that. You got to understand that my school is teaching the same content, Ottawa is teaching the same content. I don't know if Yale has a nursing program, but maybe they're teaching the same concept, and we're all being lined up to become registered nurses. So kind of approach it from that mindset and think, yes, there are things I need to emphasize in my studying, but that doesn't mean I should limit my studying. So when I'm listening to these podcasts, I don't skip over concepts of where they're talking about the clinical aspect or they're only talking about the, like, if you're going to become a doctor aspect. I make sure to keep my studying broad when it comes to these podcasts so that I don't miss out any information. The next aspect is going to focus on my sit down studying. Now, this is the more traditional studying that you will see is recommended. So the first thing I do is I review my slides. Once again, my slides just give an overview. My patho professor actually doesn't have a lot of words on his slides, so it's just good to refresh my mind. Whereas in your pre-lecture stuff, it was more passive thing. You're just reviewing it for the sake of reviewing it. Now you're going to want to go a bit more in depth. So whatever bullet points your professor has on the lecture slides, I want you to talk about it. This technique is called the Feynman technique. It's basically where you teach someone else a concept and that kind of helps remember it. I'm a more independent studier. I don't really like to do study groups. That's just how I remember things. Study groups are more for like last minute studying, but you can use the Feynman technique by using a whiteboard and writing it down. You can use flashcards, but the way I like to do it is just thinking about it in my head or even talking it out just out loud. Also, if you like going for walks, sometimes I'll go for a walk with my mom and be like, hey mom, I learned this topic, and I'll just start talking about it. The next thing you're going to want to do is review your notes. This is again where using a Word document is going to help me. What I do is I go through and I highlight important words. I'm going to admit it, I'm an over highlighter, okay? I highlight pretty much everything because I think everything's important. But this highlighting isn't the traditional highlighting where I'm using multiple different colors because I want each color to mean a different thing. Again, this is why you need to adapt it to your own routine. I personally highlight everything in yellow for the most part, and I'm not highlighting it because it's important necessarily. I'm highlighting key words. What that means is I'm just condensing my information. Some people like to condense their information by taking their notes and then rewriting it again, but taking out like filler stuff and keep on condensing their notes until they come up with like a flashcard type thing where it's only like 5 or 6 words. So what I do is I go through and highlight in yellow, and then any other like big concepts, I'll highlight it in a different color. The colors don't necessarily have any significance for me. It's just highlighting it for the sake of highlighting at this point. The next thing I do is I use Notebook LM. If you didn't know, Notebook LM is like an AI-powered software where you basically transform your notes into multiple different things. So you can do slide decks, you can do flashcards, you can do videos. I personally use it for the podcast feature. What I do is I take my existing notes and I just copy them into Notebook LM, and I'll do like the default setting. So it's about anywhere from 15 to 25-minute podcasts. I listen to this podcast in 2 times speed, and this is great because I just refreshed my memory by using my notes and my slides. So by now now I kind of know the content. The next thing I do is I listen to the lecture audio. So again, a lot of profs have a hybrid feature in my university. So you can go in person to listen to the lecture, but they also post online lectures as well. If your class only operates off of doing in-person lectures, what I'd recommend is using the voice memos feature on your phone and recording the audio. Again, this is great to refresh your memory, again, playing on the whole fear of missing out aspect. And the last portion of the review section is using YouTube videos. YouTube is a great platform because you can hear the same concepts explained in different manners. I personally love watching animated videos on different topics because that helps me to put the audio and like me writing it down with a picture. I think the reason why my method works once again is because I'm trying to incorporate as much senses as I can by using auditory components, written components, visual, like it's all coming together. And another thing I do when I'm doing these 3 auditory things, so listening to the lecture audio, using Notebook LM, and watching YouTube videos, is I like to walk. So now I'm using the kinesthetic aspect and I'm moving around. This also helps me because I have an Apple Watch, so I need to get my steps in. After you review, which is going to be like 40% of your studying, you need to now practice. Practice is going to be like 60% of your studying because how do you really know a concept until it's tested? That's kind of what our school system enforces in us. So I don't have this on my end, but if you have a textbook that you use during your lecture time or during your practice time, use that for practice questions. Oftentimes, textbooks will have a section at the end, either it's an appendix or it's after each chapter, where they just have a bunch of practice questions. Again, don't keep a narrow mind about it. If your professor is only going to ask you multiple choice questions, still do them even if they're open-ended questions in the textbook. And yeah, next is ChatGPT. So I didn't really mention it before. I'm kind of all over the place for this video, but what I like to do in my pre-lecture stuff is I have a running Google document of all of my course learning objectives. So for each individual course, and then further divided into each individual week, I have a set of learning objectives. So for example, for pancreas, that will be the title of the section, and then it'll be structure, then it'll be function, then it'll be hormones. And I'll just list all the learning objectives. A lot of professors use this as their first slide, so we'll have a table of content slide, and I just copy those exactly. Or if I find that it's not really covering the slideshow and doing it justice, I'll make my own learning objectives and I'll use that and I'll put it into this Google Doc. So now when you go to ChatGPT, it can give you more accurate questions. Obviously, professors can do whatever they want. At the end of the day, how I like to remember it is that my professor can only test me on the learning objective. That's kind of my mantra, and obviously that doesn't always apply, but it does give me a good blanket view of everything. So you can copy this exact phrase into chat when you use it next, but what I say is give me 20 multiple choice questions based on the following learning objectives and keep the answers until the end and insert whatever your learning objectives are. This is because you're now working into active recall, and how to elevate your active recall is by only leaving the answers until the end. If you constantly give yourself grace and you answer a question and then immediately give yourself that gratification of checking the answer, you're not actually going to study. On most of our university and high school exams, what they'll do is they'll make you sit through the full length of the exam, give you 2 weeks, and then they'll release the grades afterwards. So you kind of got to condition your brain to delay that gratification and do the whole full length test, and then that's when you check your answers at the end. This is also a faster way of studying that I find. The next resource I use is Quizlet. Quizlet is a commonly known flashcard site. I know that Anki is another platform you can use, but for me, I personally like the Quizlet interface. So during the first half of the semester, I wanted to try something new, and I was making my own Quizlets about my different topics. And again, I only have 3 classes, so I do have time to make Quizlets, but I just got lazy. There are millions of pre-made Quizlets out there. Someone has thankfully taken their time out of their day to make Quizlets and then make them public. So I'd recommend checking those. And oftentimes you can actually look up your own school and they'll have courses tailored to that. The next resource I use is StuDocu. StuDocu I find is a decent platform. There you can find a bunch of like past papers, past tests. It's not always accurate, and some people just upload like random stuff. That's why I don't use it all the time. That's more of like a last minute cramming studying, me seeing if there's any information I can find. Don't rely on other people to study or post the content. You need to do your own studying first. And the last thing I do is something that I recently found on TikTok. I know I was on TikTok when I should have been studying, but in my defense, I was on like study talk, study motivation TikTok, so it kind of helped me. The resource is called called Claude, I don't know how to pronounce it. Again, it's kind of like ChatGPT, but whereas on ChatGPT, if you ask it for a study guide, you can ask ChatGPT to make you a printable study guide and you'll just get the copy text. But what I noticed with this platform is that you can actually download it or you can make a Word document out of it, which is pretty cool actually. So this prompt, I'm not the owner of this prompt actually. I found it on TikTok. I don't remember who made it, but I kind of changed it to my course. I just said, hey, I'm in, insert your class here. So I'm in pathophysiology class. I have a test coming up and I want to learn, not memorize. Can you make me a study guide based on the following content? And then that's where you upload whatever PDFs you have in your own notes. You can also insert your slideshow. And if your learning objectives are very specific and they're not tailored to the general thing, you can be like, and can you please focus on these specific objectives? At the end of the guide, can you provide me with 20 multiple choice questions, leaving the answers until the end? And then that prompt usually does a good job. It'll give you a pretty much condensed version of your notes. It'll add different colors to it so you can memorize it a bit better. Or my bad, not memorize. Learn it, retain it. Very important. And yeah, that pretty much sums up my whole study routine as of right now. Just to recap, you want to listen to podcasts throughout. You want to come to class prepared, do all your pre-lectures. If you have textbook readings, skim over those. Then you want to focus a good chunk of your studying on doing revision and going through your slides, your notes, your lecture audios. But then you want to spend a majority of your time doing practice questions to test yourself and know if you actually know your stuff. As a last bit of motivation, I'm going to give you a few study tips, study tricks that I find really useful. Again, a lot of profs do use textbooks, but I realized that after year one, I'm not going to read all those textbook readings. A better way that I do this is I only focus on bolded words. 9 times out of 10, these are going to be definitions. I'm also under that naive aspect that, again, my prof is going to teach me what I need to know. I don't really focus on the textbook too much. I'll instead, at the beginning of my document, I'll add all the definitions that I find in the textbook. I don't really read them too in depth, but it is, again, a primer kind of way of learning. In psychology, if you do end up taking that class, you kind of learn how to learn. And one of those things is constantly repeating your study technique. You will find that with my study technique, it is very repetitive, and it's just because of that. Memorization does help. It's not everything, but it does help. So by you constantly repeating your study techniques and you priming yourself in different aspects, it'll help you retain more information. Next is your study environment. I, again, am an independent studier. I like to study in my room, but feel free to go to different environments and study. I also enjoy studying in cafes and my school's library, and sometimes it can be good to just surround yourself with people who are also doing similar tasks. At least for me, I'm less inclined to go on my phone if I'm studying my school's library because literally everyone has their notes out and has their laptop out, so I'd kind of feel weird. And if you do have the opportunity to, I'd recommend doing your practice tests in an actual classroom. A common theme that I find with a lot of students is that they talk about how, oh, I knew all that content, I knew the answer, or you come out of the test saying, oh, I knew that answer, but it's not because you didn't know the answer on the test, it was because you haven't actually practiced in that environment. If you do a practice test in a classroom that's similar to your class's setup, it'll also help you practice doing a test in that environment. Some people have test taking anxiety where they could study for hours and they can know their content like the back of their hand, but on test day they could feel really nervous. They could feel like they have to go to the bathroom. I'm pretty much just describing myself right now, but it can be really anxiety inducing if you don't actually practice an environment that's similar to the one you're going to be taking your test. Again, why you should be going to class. It kind of helps to ease that anxiety, and it's even better if you need to take that exam in that specific classroom. So that is all the advice I have for you guys today. Let me know if this helped you out. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the YouTuber kind of things. I am also active on my Instagram and TikTok, same username and everything. But yeah, feel free to subscribe and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.